Hi friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. So at the end of Return of the Jedi, the Rebels managed to destroy the second Death Star. Everything was great. There was a huge celebration. Han and Leia hooked up, Luke saw ghosts, and the Ewoks rounded up all the Imperials left on the planet and ate them. But what if I told you this was all fake? What if I told you everything you're watching right now was shot on a green screen in a hollow studio somewhere on Coruscant? What if I told you this was one of the largest cover-ups in Star Wars history? Now, you might be thinking, Alan, why would the New Republic need to fake the celebrations on Endor? Well, simply because they can. History belongs to the victors. We are told time and time again by Rebel sympathizers about the heroic deeds of individuals like Luke Skywalker, Han Solo, and Princess Leia Organa. But how many times do we hear about the munitions plants on Alderaan? Or Saul Guerrera's death squads? How many times do we hear about the death toll of the destruction of both Death Stars? Or the millions of lives lost in the unrest following the collapse of the Empire? We don't hear these things because the New Republic, like most organizations that gain power, use that power to shape the narrative in a direction that most benefits themselves. The Rebel Alliance saved lives and freed slaves. Killing a few million people, including a huge amount of non-combatants, wouldn't really fit that narrative. Tech Insider a few years ago questioned several scientists about the plausibility of the Endor celebrations. They unanimously agreed that these images were impossible. We'll be using their research along with our own to explain what exactly happened on Endor. Using this footage from the Rebel Command Center, they determined that the second Death Star was orbiting at an extremely low altitude, roughly around 460 kilometers, a little bit further out than the ISS is from Earth. When Lando and Wedge manage to destroy the reactor and blow up the Death Star, the explosion itself takes much longer than the instantaneous explosion of the first Death Star. That means most likely several large fragments were created and very little of the materials were actually vaporized. It also means that most of these fragments weren't moving fast enough to escape out of Endor's gravity field. Now, we're not exactly sure how large the second Death Star is, but it's estimated to be around 200 to 400 kilometers in diameter. To give you guys an idea how destructive something that large would be to a planet, the asteroid which killed most of the dinosaurs was only 10 kilometers wide. That impact killed off 75% of all plants and animal life on Earth. So the second Death Star and all of its mass impacting Endor would be much more devastating. For one, Endor is only 4,900 kilometers in diameter, and Earth is 12,742 kilometers in diameter, or in width, if you believe that the world is flat. The impact would create a crater over 700 kilometers wide. Now, Endor being a forest moon does have one advantage. It has no giant bodies of water, which means no mega tsunamis. But believe it or not, that's not where the majority of the damage comes from during an asteroid impact. At ground zero, everything within hundreds of kilometers will be destroyed and vaporized. The collision will be more powerful than any weapon we've ever made here on Earth. The asteroid which took out the dinosaurs was 1 billion times more powerful than the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima. The intense eruption would instantly vaporize rock, metal, and anything else it hits, and launch millions of tons of material into the upper atmosphere. Here's where things get really dangerous. These materials will begin their descent, heating up into fireballs. Alone, a small meteorite has hardly any effect on local climates, but with millions of meteorites entering the atmosphere, suddenly all the air on the planet would become superheated. Depending on how much material re-enters the atmosphere and how large the planet is, the surface temperature could increase well beyond the limits of a conventional oven. And Endor being a forest moon will suddenly become one gigantic bonfire. Anyone or anything that wasn't shielded would get burnt to a crisp. And the Ewoks being primitive and delicious would probably all be helpless and cooked. For way too long. Not even their magical bows would be able to save them. Also, depending on where the asteroid hits, the material being vaporized could be very toxic. When the asteroid that killed the dinosaurs and drove the lizard people into the center of the Earth impacted, it vaporized tons of gypsum, which is a sulfuric mineral, and when that mineral reached the upper atmosphere, it turned into sulfuric clouds, which created acid rain. That killed off any plant life that was remaining. A layer of these materials and dust would stay in the sky for several months, if not years, and create a cloud blanket over the planet. Without light, photosynthesis would be impossible and Captain Planet would die, and new seeds growing in the ashes of the Endor forest would quickly die as well and be taken over by fungi. In the long run, without the sun, the surface temperature of Endor would dip to way below freezing, and without any giant bodies of water to retain any heat, there would be no refuge from this cold. Eventually the skies would clear and things would probably get back to normal, but the Ewoks, like the dinosaurs, would most likely be extinct. Which leaves me with this one last question. Have you guys ever tried Ewok meat? It's actually really great. And with this new revelation about what happened at the end of the Battle of Endor, well, this might be your last chance to try these delicious little furry critters. Ewoks, despite their plump appearance, are much leaner than you think. As a matter of fact, they're packed full of nutrients and have only half the fat of a Nerf steak. And things always taste better when you know what you're eating is endangered. So good that you know it's wrong. For a limited time, or at least until all this meat spoils, if you join the Outer Rim Steak Company for a low monthly fee of just 99 credits, we'll send you a pound of chubby Ewok cheeks, the most fatty and delicious part of these little critters. Along with that, they'll send you an exotic sampler of the finest meat on this side of the Corellian Run every month. Ever wonder what a Twi'lek Sliaku tastes like, but you don't want to go through the trouble of kidnapping a sentient being and explaining to your butcher how having a refined taste isn't the same thing as being a murderer? What about rancor testicles? Well, it might taste terrible going down, but it sure will help you get up. And lastly, of course, they say you are what you eat. So why not try some Jedi meat aged and frozen since Order 66? It might not give you force powers, but it'll make your enemies fear and respect you. Okay, maybe just fear you. But anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. In all seriousness, please do not partake in cannibalism. Not only is it morally wrong, it's also probably illegal from wherever you guys are from. And if it's not, you guys are in a screwed up country. Anyway, guys, leave it to the professionals when it comes to stuff like that. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification button so you don't miss out on all of our new random awesome content. And a special thanks to all you Patreon supporters out there. Without your support, we wouldn't have the courage to continue exposing all the lies of the New Republic and the Empire. Thanks for joining us today. If you're watching this, you are Generation Tech.